So welcome. I'm Paul Walsh with the EBAA, focusing on membership at the EBAA. We've got a very exciting program lined up for you on maintenance today. And well, business aviation is seen as a very glamorous segment, but I think we all know that the truth can be different from the perception. And one place where that is the case is on our AMAC committees. So these are essentially about 150 people in the EBAA membership who are essentially volunteers. They come together to run projects, to discuss, to share experiences, really on how to make the industry better. So it's something that we're very appreciative of. It's long-term work. It's not very glamorous, as I said. And today is all about really interacting with these people. We didn't set up a webinar format. We've set up a meeting format, and that means that we'd really like you to speak. But actually, we had a meeting like this on Tuesday with charter brokers and people in aircraft sales, and I only managed to get one person to speak during that call. And you know, these were brokers. I mean, speaking is really a big part of their job description. So I'm really looking for people to sort of break the stereotype today and speak up during these sessions and engage with our speakers. I'm very happy to have Arjen Groeneveld on the panel today. He's not a shrinking violet. He's chair of the maintenance committee. We'll also be joined by Paul Ewers from ASL and Blair Henderson from Traxel later in the call. Arjen, you're the head of our maintenance committee, and I'm keen to know what you say to people who come to you and complain that nothing really is changing, that the regulations are disproportionate, that EASA is not interesting. You're working for an American company. You seem like quite an optimistic guy. Is there anything you can say to give these people some hope?
Yeah, so good afternoon. Yeah, I think there is hope, certainly. One important first step is that you get the right stakeholders around the table. One of the important things is when you listen in the industry with operators, with their KMO departments, and then with the Part 145s, is that most cases they struggle with changes, little tweaks into the regulation. So then one of the stakeholders is also EASA. You need to get them on board. And as a business aviation industry, you need to create one voice, and that you can channel the main points towards EASA and get things done. So far, I think we accomplished with that, and we had good tractions also in really also like in December 2019, and then this today is also to after COVID, etc., to move on with the momentum.
Great, thanks, Arjen. And I think, you know, an important point as well is that we'd like to get more people involved. That gives us a stronger voice. I think we have a meeting coming up on October the 12th, which is sort of re-energizing this committee. So we'll talk a bit more about that later. I'm going to get into technology and innovation in business aviation maintenance now. And we have Blair Henderson on the line from Traxel. And Blair, sometimes I have the impression that you make it look very easy, that you came from the banking sector, you started a new company, it grew and became successful quite quickly, and everything looks like it's going to plan. So I was wondering if that is the case, or are you just presenting a projection and really behind the scenes it's the usual sort of stress and chaos of entrepreneurship?
There is some stress and chaos at times, but we have quite a large team now. We're about 175 employees in the company. Pretty diverse background. We have, you know, pilots, co-pilots, engineers, IT, big IT staff, and we've always been involved in technology-focused business. Financial services is highly integrated technologically, and there's you know, a couple of things that we see and have always seen in our end of the aviation business, where there is a bit of a struggle to get from the old paper-based systems and different types of systems that don't properly talk to each other and don't integrate. And I think there's many companies like ourselves who are focused on smoothing out the bumps in the road and making systems that are much more adapted to what we're trying to do, which is save money, be more efficient, keep the aircraft in the air. And of course, we operate in the maintenance end of things. We're not in the glorious, fancy front office, as you mentioned earlier. You won't see us on television, put it that way. But keeping the aircraft flying and at a good price, and having an effective and efficient maintenance organization is how we like to help our customers. And we do have.
Thanks, Blair. What are the biggest opportunities that you see for innovation in maintenance, let's say in the next 10 years?
Well, what we're seeing now is, I think there's two main macro issues, high-level issues. The first is convergence of many different types of technologies, and the second is most likely mobility, as we see it. Convergence meaning the struggle or the attempt at getting systems to work with each other, being able to bring together different technologies. For example, we've just completed one of our first AI projects for a large manufacturer where we're helping them in logistics area, which 5 years ago, I would have never thought we'd even be, in that realm. We're seeing a big focus on people, customers trying to improve their workflows, but even go beyond that. Things like e-signature, using iPads throughout the organization, maintenance, pilots, everyone, and having a way, a structure that all of this data can flow in a logical way, be accurate, timely, and be able to provide management, upper management, with business metrics so they can see and rate and gauge how their business is doing, rather than just hunches or having to have 16 different spreadsheets on the table to figure out where the business is going. We're working hard with a lot of major customers to create a structure for them where all of the systems in their business are all flowing upwards to the C-level guys, so these people can make serious, large financial decisions, personnel decisions, fixed asset decisions, based on some really hard usable data. So that's one thing we're seeing, the whole convergence of all this.
Okay, I think we'll just stay on that for a moment. Paul, is this how you see things as well? Is this where you see some of the biggest opportunities, and would this type of convergence really help you? Would you like to make progress there in the operations that you're managing?
Yes, definitely. Historically, as engineers, we're not very good at the commercial side of things, others better than others, but we don't concentrate on that. So anything that gives us that information without having to do the work is going to benefit us, because at the end of the day, as you progress through an organization, you need to deal with that commercial aspect, and as Blair has mentioned, present those figures in an understandable way. I often hear that engineers, when they talk to each other, are understood, but not by anybody else.
Absolutely. And so you're with ASL, is that right?
Correct. Correct.
It strikes me as quite a sort of entrepreneurial company, and I was wondering if you have been sort of quicker to adapt to some of this technology, or what's your experience there?
No, I can't say that we have. We have in other areas, maybe more on the flight ops than the maintenance. But yes, it is an entrepreneurial company. I think any business aviation operator needs to be entrepreneurial because of the depth, the broad depth that you've got to be involved in, from the aircraft types through the different destinations. If I look at ASL, we operate 42 aircraft, 2 AOCs, 1 Part 145, and across those 42 aircraft, I'm looking probably a difference of 10 to 14 different types.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that complexity a bit later in the call. But Blair, I sort of cut you off there. You wanted to talk about the second kind of opportunity for innovation in
Sure, I'll try to be brief. I'm sure most of your viewers and friends in the community understand when we talk about mobility, but this is really something that has really come up, percolated up to the top of a lot of people's do lists, which is how to empower their staff, how to empower everybody in the ecosystem so that they have access to this data, whether they're at home, whether they're in the plane, whether they're on the shop floor. You know, we're now seeing many customers adopt electronic task cards, electronic work plans, everybody on the shop floor carrying around an iPad where they can log on to jobs, track labor per tasks. And again, using that type of mobility, which is all interconnected, feeding everything up to the management systems and integrating with even other systems such as SAP or Sage or whatever they might be using. But the key is to get away from all these disconnected manual, semi-manual, or legacy systems who don't want to talk to each other. And for us, all of this, a side benefit of all of this is business continuity planning. Once you have everything in a digital format or as much as possible, and it's all feeding up to the cloud and you're getting, you know, instantaneous backup, the building can burn down, but you still have all your records. When they're manual, when they're paper, when they're sitting on different laptops throughout the organization, you know, problems happen. So for us, we're looking from the whole thing, from, you know, all the way in the basement, all the way up to the C-suite, to the chairman's suite, where all this data is safe, it's properly collated, it's talking to each other. And on top of that, we layer, you know, dynamic reporting, where someone can go in and say, from something so simple as saying, what happened to that aircraft last June? How come we've got a $150,000 invoice and we don't know what we paid for? Okay. Be able to dive in to, you know, the data should not just be historical data. It should be viewed as a living type of data that you can go in, work with, manipulate, and you know, produce. You know, data is very static. It's information that you want. Data turns into information once you've manipulated it, once you've processed it, once you've put it in a format where managers can look at it and say, wow, we never knew that's what's happening down there on the shop floor. We never knew that that was that complicated for you guys to deal with, like Paul is saying, 14 different types of aircraft across 40 or 50 aircraft. Many times we're shocked. We're shocked. Go ahead.
Come in on that one, because we have a great question in the chat as well. And it seems like this is self-evident that this should be adopted. So I was wondering, sort of in your experience with working from companies, actually I wasn't wondering, we have the question from Tony Lucci. The improvements that should be made, do you think they're delayed because of cost issues, or do the maintenance department have difficulties convincing management that there is actually a problem?
I think the maintenance people and even the operations people suffer because the tools they have at their disposal on any given day don't permit them to put all of this information. If you're dealing with financial people, and I come from financial services business, a very, very large bank, you couldn't go to see a C-level guy and say, I think we should do this. I think we've got a problem over here, or in wherever it might be, without being able to back up your comments and your opinions with hard data, with facts.
Well, we need to actually ask for the investment in data to be able to convince management to make smart business decisions. Just getting over that first step. And
management want it now. They don't want to fly by the seat of their pants. I mean, everybody in maintenance understands how expensive it is to purchase aircraft, to maintain aircraft, to keep them flying, to keep the parts in stock. We just had a customer recently who's been complaining about nothing but logistics problems and parts problems. After they went through this type of catharsis, they ended up reducing their spare parts inventory by $750,000. And that's on a $5 million inventory.
Yeah.
But they still have everything they need, but they couldn't see it before. You know, you have an inventory
Yeah, I get
list,
it.
but you don't know what's slow moving. You don't know what's fast moving. You don't know how many times you paid FedEx to bring something in on a Friday night when you probably should have had it in the first place. This is the type of decision making that management needs to see. But when you have all these separate systems not talking to each other, it's difficult for management, and it's difficult for department people. You know, the director of maintenance, it's really hard to be able to say, I need more parts. Management say, you've got $2 million of parts. Stop bothering us about parts. You might have the wrong parts. You might have inherited them from the guy before you. So we're really working hard with customers on the we call it aviation intelligence. Might be a big phrase for what we're doing, but to really drill down, find out what the metrics are, and then be able to tell customers. It would be great if you could see all this info on a daily basis, on a real-time basis even. And then you're really, you know, you're really cooking.
Yeah. Thanks, Blair. I'm going to ask Tony
Pleasure.
to come in on this as well. Tony, so what's your experience? I saw you sort of laughing in recognition of some of the things that Blair was saying.
Yeah, absolutely, Blair. You hit the nail there. Sometimes it's the amount of historical data which is not easy to match with each other. I think there is also something to be said for the industry to come up with an international standard, particularly what Paul was mentioning about documentation. Every OEM has its own documentation format. We as MROs need to modify and work with those. It would be good to see some kind of international standard, which seems to be out there, but not by everybody used, or used in a different format, so that the information which is available is not linked. Like Blair was saying, is linking that information, making it available in one unified format, which would help efficiently the MROs, but also at the end, the management team, to see what is happening. Documentation is one of them, out of personal experience. It took time and effort to convince the OEM that it is worthwhile. At the end, it does bring benefits for them as well, and they need to be convinced. And sometimes the OEMs needs to be convinced of that scenario as well.
And
So,
Tony, I should have asked you this at the beginning. I'm going to let you continue now. Tell us what company you're working for and what you're doing.
I'm working for an MRO in Amsterdam, small business aviation MRO, jet support.
Okay.
We maintain business aircrafts from a variety, and we're looking also in improvements and also technology-driven improvements as well.
Okay.
So it is in that respect, where are we going with maintenance? How does EASA hamper us? How does the OEM hamper us? Absolutely. But to me, this is also an industry OEM issue as well.
Yeah.
Somewhat based out of maybe protection measurements and means. But for us as users in the business aviation and community, some kind of standard which would bring that all together makes it easier to retrieve that data, to look into the data, and then also have it easy accessible, like Blair was saying, for the management team as well. It goes from the engineer all the way up to the management.
And when you say sort of a protectionistic approach, are you talking on the OEM side?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It is knowledge, it is information they not always want to share, and they create their own barriers to protect the data and the information. But at the end, if you're running, let's say 10, 20 different aircraft types, you have to deal with all individuals.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. And we'll be coming back to the issue of OEM and independence maintenance support later on in the call.
In?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. And after that, Paul, I'm going to go to Paolo because he's had his hand up for a while, but go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, Paolo. Yeah, I just wanted to touch a few points on Blair and also from Tony to tie them in. So from going to digital, I think we all understand as an industry that's the way we need to go, but we are still historically behind. For example, with the EASA requirements, we have an aircraft technical log system. Yeah. So that's open to interpretation, but it certainly doesn't mean keeping the original logbooks up to date. But when we export an aircraft, we've got examples of EASA, FAA, and one recently to India, where they've gone through the logs of the aircraft and they said, well, you haven't kept the logbooks up to date. And what they're expecting to see is, historically, like in the past, a little CRS in a little blue book. so we have a way to change as an industry and break that historical way of doing it.
So because we're talking about, let's say, the lack of understanding for business aviation, the challenges there, lack of proportionality, but actually internally, there's a lot that we could achieve as well, is what I think that
Correct.
you're saying.
And I think that goes into what Tony was saying, that if there was a system that was, let's say ICAO, let's call it ICAO, and we followed that through, then whether I look at Blair's books, whether I look at Tony's books, I would straight away see what I need to know.
Absolutely.
Then
okay, and just I'll let you finish. Go on.
Yeah. Then going back to the investment in systems, I completely agree that it's the way we need to go. What I find, and I know we're going to look at this later, is that we've got a choice. We've got so many regulations coming across, and whether that's always got a cost, whether it's a pure financial cost in investment or it's a financial cost in time. And quite often what it comes down to is, do we invest in going forward to produce the business data that we need, or do we spend the costs on complying with the latest regulation?
Yeah.
And I think we all know where we have to go first.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Paul. Paolo, you've been waiting patiently.
Good morning.
Good morning. I think is a director of maintenance at NetJets, maybe at a different scale to some of our other members. How do you approach making business cases based on data and what technology are you using?
Just two quick things that I'd like to share with the panel. First of all, the investments, at least my experience, needs to be fully justified, full-blown business cases with economic translation.
Yeah.
And for me, when I have a system that can say, okay, this will increase compliance, I cannot translate compliance into money. This will increase the safety operating margin. How do you translate the increase of operating safety margin in money? I don't know to do this. So sometimes one of the frustrations, and Tony is right on the point, is we as KMO engineers and responsibles, sometimes it's very difficult to pass the message to the board, because the board see numbers and figures, and translating compliance, safety, process simplification. If I don't dismiss one person, there is no benefit. So, okay, this system is automated. Okay, how many people are going to fire? Well, no one, exactly, because I reshuffle the people around to do something different. Oh, the message does not pass. So actually, that's one of the challenges on the business case. On the data set, we NetJets Europe, we are operating 6 aircraft different types. We are dealing with 4 aircraft OEMs and 2 engine OEMs. And the documentation is a totally disgrace, between commas.
Yeah.
We are still receiving paper logbooks. Paper. We are in 2021, paper logbooks, paper log cards, cartoons on new deliveries. This is a disaster. And we as a KMO, we need to integrate everything. We need to digitize everything. We need to scan everything. That's a big burden on us. So I'll say that we need a revolution. Maybe EASA, the regulators, may help us out to enforce standards, because we cannot make much progress with system integration and development if we have the legacy systems coming from the OEMs. In my perspective, that's the way to start. We need to take the OEMs on board to deliver digital formats that everyone understands. For example, technology-wise, just to conclude, we are talking about blockchain. Blockchain is a great technology. However, without a standard that is widely adapted, there is no much use for it. So we really need some standardization to make the life easier to the stakeholders, from the OEMs to the last one to dispose the aircraft. And they are lacking that. And without that, I don't see much progress in systems integration.
Okay. Thank you, Paolo. I was once reading something about project management where they said that whoever is not in the room is always the one that gets the blame. So I don't know if this will turn into OEM bashing, but in fact, we have OEMs on the call today. So if you'd like to kind of join in, we'd love to hear from you. What's your view on innovation? How are you approaching digitalization? Put up your hand, we'll get you into the call, so that there's a good balance in the discussion. At least I think, since we're you know, we're a bit pressed for time. I think we can move on now to the next topic, which is more to do with regulations and standardizations. We have discussed this or touched on this somewhat already. I'm going to go back to Paul. Do you struggle transferring aircraft from one jurisdiction to another?
Yes, absolutely, and for many reasons. The initial question was for STCs, and I think over the years with the FAA and EASA, that has actually improved. Where we struggle the most is possibly again with the manufacturers and the type certificates. So if I could look at I can name a Gulfstream, Embraer, even Citations. I can name all of them that cannot directly be transferred from one jurisdiction to another. And I'm not talking about regulatory requirements. I'm talking about basic type certificate requirements. So I give you one example. The stick shaker activation speed is different for an EASA aircraft compared to the FAA. So it needs a computer change. So most of these aircraft, we're looking at 250,000 euros, dollars to make that change from EASA to the FAA or to the FAA to EASA. And
just to interrupt, is there any justification for this? I mean, is there any context behind this? I mean, this is just a lack of efficiency, regulatory misalignment?
It must be, unless there's physically something different in the air density between the US and the EASA states. Yeah. I think it must be regulatory requirement.
Okay. Yeah, it could also relate it to, for example, bird strike impacts. So it can be that certain aircraft, like Falcons, they have then and bird strike boxes behind the forward pressure bulkhead, so that EASA said, okay. It's a glass fiber nose. An eagle can fly through it. Maybe it hits the bulkhead, but in another case, it could also be the leading edge of a wing, and that means that certain globals, for example, they never could get on a EASA registration. It was too much of a financial burden to get it done.
Right. Thanks, Arjen. But Paul, I think that, you know, the point that you're making is that, let's say in terms of the bilaterals, the EASA, FAA alignments, there's still a lot more work to do there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's let's say where it was STCs before, yeah. It's now moved on to the type certificates. And we see more and more aircraft coming through with differences on the type certificate between the EASA and the FAA approval.
Okay. Paolo, I mean, you're a US company and the European company. Is this something that you've come up against as well?
Yeah, yeah, I'm completely aligned with Paul. We have a lot of pain when transferring aircraft, especially when you go to the used aircraft. You need to rebuild all the maintenance history back to birth. That's a big exercise. I'm talking about thousands of hours, maybe, of research. We have another problem, which is transfer of aircraft within the EU EASA member states. Because a simple thing, which is an ARC, Airworthiness Review Certificate, is most of the times not accepted by the new authority. So you need to perform full documentation reviews, aircraft physical surveys for an airplane within the EASA member states already with a valid ARC. And I questioned this to some NAAs, and the answer that I get is very strange, because it seems that they don't trust each other. I don't know if you have any NAA here, but the reason that I was given, and I have already actual cases, and you can imagine run a new ARC, it's a good exercise, it's heavy, it's costly. And the reason that they gave us, I don't accept the valid ARC because we need to see everything again. Well, but this was so by your counterpart in the other country and within the EASA. Oh, no, we need to see everything again. So message, we don't trust them. And yeah, this is a burden. And okay. There's this.
Go ahead.
And as Paul said, the STCs, ADs, we have sometimes very interesting discussions about FAA ADs, applicability in the EASA domain, applicable, not applicable. There is always stuff to discuss, so it's not a clean exercise moving aircraft around.
Yeah, and I think, you know, let's say the challenge for us as a sort of an association, a lobbying group, is to try to distill these issues down into some key priorities. And I think that Arjen has done some work on that already, and I'd welcome that input. And I really welcome the input that you're giving us now. I'd like to just try and take a step back just for a moment. We have another slide, and this is in my hopefully successful effort to get more people speaking on the call. So I just want to very broadly get an idea of what some of the biggest challenges are in business aviation today. Is it lack of qualified staff, the regulatory burden, lack of choice among MRO providers, or is there something that I've missed here? So I'm going to ask people to put up their hands. Who, I think there's a functionality down. If you just kind of at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see on the reactions how to put up your hand. Who on the call today thinks that lack of qualified staff is the biggest challenge? Anyone putting up their hand for that? Okay, so is that because we have one?
To be honest, I haven't got the functionality to be able to do it on my screen, so I can't.
Okay, and so but this is Glenn from ACC, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Hi, and
how you doing?
So what's the answer? What do you think?
So I think this is it's definitely a Europe, well, maybe a worldwide problem, but definitely a European. Yeah. We see that a lot of MROs are expanding. You know, taking Bombardier as an OEM, they have huge hangars. You know, there's just not the people or the skilled people around to be able to easily expand the business, and even, you know, for the day-to-day running in a lot of the cases. So it's a massive problem. Without, I mean, Niels as well, who's obviously involved more than I am in that, but yeah, huge problem.
And do you think there's some opportunities for a group like EBAA to get some progress in this, in the sense that a lot of the reason is the training that's required, particularly training that's linked to different types, where maybe when types are close to each other, there probably isn't really a safety justification for that additional training that's required.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, on top of that, you know, in the last 18 months, when you're sending people for training, you know, this has not impacted even further on the ability to get people in the right position and to get them trained the way they need to be trained. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks very much. I also saw Marcus Lehman had your hand up as well. Marcus, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, well, basically what we see the same thing here. I'm from Global Air. We have 21 aircrafts in the fleet, and it's part of the thing. We've got a very successful summer, so there's a lot of flying going on. So it means the maintenance gets shorter, and it means we need more maintenance. And I think the same happens to the other guys like Midgets. So you see more demand on the MRO markets out there. And so there's lots of filling up easier, the filling up faster, and a lot of people have issues getting the right people on, because the business aviation market is fundamentally different from the commercial aviation market. So you cannot really say I'm taking somebody from an airline and putting them in business aviation. It doesn't really work, and so we'll see the market for business aviation engineers slowly drying up as far as we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcus. Paul, you want to come in on that again?
Yeah, just to really back up what Marcus is saying, I understand that certainly in the US, 6 months ago, 10% of the global general aviation market were for sale. Now it's reduced down to 5%. So every sale possibly starts with a PPI and then goes on to a refurbishment. So all the MROs are absolutely rammed with work at the moment. And that does make our work more difficult, in that we've got to go further and pay a little bit more to get the service we want.
Yeah.
Completely true.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Anybody out there who thinks that the regulatory burden is the biggest challenge? Blair?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest challenge, because the other choices, the other issues we have, even though there might be few alternatives, to solve the problem. There are alternatives. When it comes to dealing with government, EASA, you have no alternative. It's the only game in town.
Yeah.
And because it's the only game in town, you have to play their game, and they control the pitch. So as a industry, as a group, EBAA, we need to have lobbying at those government agencies so they can hear what we're suffering with. And unfortunately, we don't have much alternative other than to stay at it. We can't work around them. We can't work without them. We're really burdened with their bureaucracy and the way they want to run their regulatory systems. So for me, I think it's the biggest challenge is dealing with those monolithic legacy type bureaucracies. Very, very difficult, very slow. Yeah, I mean, there are bright spots, but in general, I think we're seeing that's holding back, especially at the technology level. I mean, when regulators can't even understand in some jurisdictions electronic signatures, yet when they finish, they use a bank machine all day long with a 4-digit PIN code, but they look at electronic signatures on CRSs as if it's some black art. It's very difficult. They just are set in their ways.
Blair, I might just bring in my colleague Robert Baltus on this as well. We're working with EASA every day. We just came off a webinar with them on OR-LD. Robert, do you think that EASA are as difficult to work with as Blair is suggesting?
Yeah, I used to be an operator or work for operators, including with Paulo for years, and I like bashing EASA, or I liked bashing EASA. I fully concur that as an operator or an MRO, it is extremely frustrating. However, being now more into the process, what I found is actually, and that's where the working group, their role, as well as Paulo's role, is important in bringing the issues to EASA is very important, because there's two things. First of all, EASA, as it's being created, there's an issue with how it's being created. It has not been given the proper mandate by the member states. So everything you see with standardization is because of the lack of the proper mandate. And they have issues enforcing it, etc. So a lot of the things we run into, and I think transfer of an aircraft between EASA states is the prime example. It is still the NAAs who can give their own interpretation too much on a lot of things. And that is so annoying. But the positive thing is it's as annoying to EASA sometimes as it is to us. The other thing, and this is where our role comes in as an association, is a lot of the staff and the FILA officers at EASA, and even worse at the NAAs, don't understand business aviation. Don't understand that you might have a fleet of 10 aircraft with 10 different aircraft types, or even the same aircraft, but with all different variations. So we are a labor-intensive, different kind of breed that they don't fully understand. So we constantly need to make sure that they understand business aviation, they understand our issues, and push it through. And actually, that's where it's crucial, and that's why I absolutely love the discussion so far. You guys need to tell us what the priorities are, and I like the challenges, things we have on the slide here, but we need to know what to push most, because we can't go in with 30 items, but if we have a top 5 or top 10 or whatever, and constantly we will go in and go there. It will never be finished. Working with EASA is sometimes like watching paint dry, and it takes a lot of time, but the intention is there, the people are listening, but we need to educate them, but the NAAs as well. And so any stupid things you run into, and specifically if you're a company with bases and AOCs in different countries, please tell us. We need to know and help us prioritize and keep on pushing for it. And you're spot on, Blair. Electronic signatures, stuff like the layout of a form, things like that. You can't believe it, but unfortunately it is our day to day, and let's make it easier one issue at a time.
Thanks, Robert. Good. I want to kind of get through my slide here. Anybody on the call who thinks that lack of choice among MRO providers is the big challenge now? This is one perhaps that's a bit more controversial. So I don't know, is it that people don't want to talk about it? Okay. I might just bring in, and I'm cold calling people now, so apologies in advance. I might just bring in Vitas from Jet Maintenance Solutions, because you are, I think, an independent MRO provider. So I'd like to, you maybe to give your perspective on the market. If you'd like to jump in, Vitas, are you there? Are you online?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
So we've seen, I think, quite an important transformation over the past couple of years in terms of the options that are available to operators. How do you see this from the point of view of a MRO provider?
Look, all these topics which you're covering, guys, here is very important for definitely for the society. We're talking about the MRO perspective and what we are doing back here. We are struggling with the manpower, definitely. Over here in this part of the Europe, it's very difficult to attract people to work in this part of the world, even though when we go back to the West, especially right now in the Biggin Hill, it's also difficult to think about finding the manpower and bringing from the European Union, as long the UK went out of it. So for us, manpower and finding the right people, putting them into the one place, it's really difficult. Even though we are looking for the IT solutions, automatization solutions, which are helping us to increase our efficiency. So, but that is not enough, and definitely it would help a lot to bring people from the third countries, skilled people from the third countries. To train them, to show them, the regulations of EASA, but to onboard them faster than it is right now. So for us, yeah, the manpower is the most difficult thing. For example, to have a certified engineer, it takes a lot of years to train him. But some people are faster in learning, and they could, be certified people. They could become faster than they are allowed today. Just because now we need to have on the practice 5 to 7 years, which is not necessarily equally right to everyone.
Yeah, okay, that's very clear. Thank you very much, Vitas. I'm going to Glenn. You want to come in on that as well?
Yeah, I think when we talk about from a 145 perspective, there's always the challenges that we face, which are driven by the OEMs, and and really all of them, they don't like third-party providers. That's clear. They don't like independence. It's always a challenge. We've faced many difficulties, especially over the last 12 months, with certain OEMs and some even basic stuff out of warranty aircraft. I won't go into details, but stuff that is really crazy sometimes, which just is restricting the opportunity of the customer to maybe go and have the work that he wants to be done where he wants to be done. So he's kind of being forced and driven down a certain route.
So would you go as far to say as this is a sort of anti-competitive practice?
Yeah, and the thing is, North American rules, for example, are different to European rules, and sometimes maybe the OEMs don't really see that. But we face that, but absolutely, I see it. Okay,
thanks, Glenn. Paul, are you satisfied with the options that are available in terms of independent MROs and OEM-run MROs? How do you see this?
Yeah, I think. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I think it's become more difficult for the independent MROs. The manufacturers, let's say, service station, have tried to take a bigger chunk of the pie, and this has made it more difficult for the independents to get hold of the maintenance data, get the funding for the tooling, and we've certainly seen that have an impact on the smaller organizations. We tend to divide the organizations down into three areas. One is the manufacturers' MROs, The second one is the kind of first tier independents, which are quite often bigger organizations. And then thirdly, the independent organization, which is quite bespoke. So it may concentrate on a more niche aircraft product. And when you take those niche aircraft products to the manufacturer's MRO, quite often they're not set up for that. So the skill set isn't there for the older aircraft. So there is a requirement to have each and every one in the market. And I just hope that the manufacturer's MROs understand this.
Yeah.
But I can imagine for the bigger independents, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, in a way, I see you're trying to look at it in an optimistic way, sort of holding out hope that sort of each segment of the market will be able to bring some value, and that every segment of the let's say demand from an operator side is catered for. Blair, you have any thoughts on what's at work here in terms of how OEMs are approaching the MRO market?
Well, I think they're large businesses who, obviously have a very commercial point of view looking at revenues. I think they see that much like that's happening in the automotive industry, where the independent car dealer, the independent garage, it's almost impossible to find any of them now. If you have a high-end vehicle, BMW, Mercedes, Range Rover, you're not going to be taking it anywhere you want. You're going to have to go where the manufacturer wants you to go. And I think that's the model that maybe some of the OEMs are following. Not all of them. Some are much more friendlier than others, but the way they control access to maintenance manuals, to services, to tooling specifications, to certifications on their aircraft and everything else is really burdensome. And like some of the gentlemen on this call have voiced opinions, it's really difficult. And for the independent MRO, I think Paul Luer's comment about the niche players, I think some of the MROs will have to specialize into certain types of aircraft, be the best they can be on those aircraft rather than being generalists, because the costs the costs and the logistics of being an MRO and servicing 12 or 15 types of aircraft, I don't know if those days are short, because it's very, very difficult. And with the big manufacturers coming in and opening up as many of their own MROs as possible, in some respects, I've heard MRO customers of ours say, my biggest supplier is also my biggest competitor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a difficult position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I might bring in Glenn again in this. We had a sales and acquisitions webinar on Tuesday, and we're hearing from the US, perhaps also in Europe, that it's hard to find an aircraft now, so people may be tempted to rush into purchases. Is it more important than ever for operators, for people in sales and acquisitions, to be really informing buyers of what they're getting into and how the market is changing? Because I'm concerned that owners might come up against sort of unpleasant surprises when it comes to the reality of owning an aircraft when you're trying to maintain that, and there aren't so many good options out there.
Yeah, I mean, from what we're seeing, we work quite closely with a lot of brokers, and especially today, I think the second-hand market has gone crazy right now. I speak with a customer yesterday, and he's buying a 20-year-old Global and not doing a PPI. He said, I buy it cheap, I worry about the problems later. And this kind of thing I'm seeing more and more, and it's quite it's a little bit frightening, actually. It's really difficult to know where the market's going right now. I think it's something it's uncharted water right now. But on the other hand as well, in terms of available aircraft, there's not a lot out there, and there's bidding wars going on. So people are actually outbidding each other on aircraft. And yeah, I really can't say where I see that going in the future, but it's definitely not sustainable with the way the market is right now.
Okay. Thanks very much, Glenn. If somebody wants to come in on this, please put up your hand. We had three options. They seem to generate some discussion. Is there the other option that we missed? Paolo, you want to come in?
Yeah. So with pleasure. There is one thing that we are suffering a lot, and it's not really on the agenda for discussion, which is fragmentation. When we are buying an aircraft today, we are not buying an aircraft from a specific OEM, A, B, or C, or D. We are buying an aircraft with OEM, with parts from other OEMs, with parts from other OEMs, and so on and so on. So there is a chain. So the aircraft is actually a set of sub-assemblies that are different type certificates, different management, different supports, different manuals, different everything. And we have already suffered. For example, we had a problem on the NTI system. It was a valve, and we start with the OEM to discuss that. Well, the OEM said, not my problem. Yeah. Maybe this is propulsion. Go to the propulsion guy. So we spoke to the propulsion OEM. They said, this is not us. This is the nacelle. So you need to speak with the TC holder of the nacelle, third OEM. Then we spoke with the third one, and they told us, we subcontracted this to someone else. We need to speak with number 4. Guess what? The number 4 was sold to another company, so there is no investment, there is no technical support, there is no reliability, and we have a major problem. That the number 1, 2, and 3 says, that's not me, that's your problem. You have the airplane, that's you have the problem. Another thing that's happened recently is about landing gears, and I believe that many people understand what I say. Landing gears, sometimes they have some leaks and they need to be repacked. On the standard approach, the tasks are in the maintenance manual, can be done on the line, so not a big deal. So I repack, I open, I put new seals, back to go, and go. So on the recent acquired airplane, we just find out that there are no instructions at all in the maintenance manual to do the trick. So we start to investigate, and what we found out is the landing gear is managed by a different OEM, a different vendor with different manuals. So you need to remove the landing gear, send it to repair shop, have it repacked and back again. In the meanwhile, we need to get a loaner of a landing gear. I'm talking about a lot of money here. Yeah. So this fragmentation, although from a business perspective makes sense to the main OEM, because it's less investment, in terms of MRO maintenance sustainability is a nightmare. And the second part of it is the obsolescence management. No one cares about obsolete systems. That says the KMU, the operator that needs to think about obsolescence. And sometimes when we have a small problem, we are giving a big solution. Oh, we have an indicator that is obsolete. Fine, buy this new glass cockpit, spend 1 million per plane, and your problem is solved. No, sorry, I have a problem in an indicator, not the full glass cockpit. Yeah. So this fragmentation is really killing, and everyone buying an aircraft needs to be very careful that you think that I'm buying from A, but actually it's from A, from B, from C, from D, and especially independent MROs, and they're struggling because there is no maintenance data, there is nothing, there is no tools, there is no parts. So what do you have to do? Remove, send to repair shop, and pay what they ask for you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Paolo. It seems that on the one hand there are not enough options for MRO services. On the other hand, there's too much fragmentation, so that getting your aircraft maintained is too complicated given the complex supply chain. I think we are running up to the time when we'll have to draw this to a close. I think it's been a very interesting discussion. We focused on the problems here. We should be trying to get onto solutions as well. And that's why I would invite you on the 21st of October to join our maintenance meeting. Based on this discussion, what I'd really like to do is to get more OEMs on board, so we have that sort of balanced discussion. We can produce a sort of fruitful interchange. I'd like to just say thank you as well. We had a couple of what we call EBAA ambassadors on this call. Arjen is one, also ACC Columbia, Jet Maintenance Solutions, JSSI, SATCOM Direct on this call today. We had a mixed year or a mixed period at EBAA. Great in that we were very relevant to members. Not so great in that we couldn't organize physical events, including EBASE, of course, but some members stepped up to give us a bit of additional support. They are an ambassador, so thank you to them. I'd like to thank everyone who joined, participated in the call today, to our panelists, to everybody on the AMAC committees for all the volunteer work that you do. We're continuing the discussion next week on Tuesday with finance and lawyers. That's all I have for today. Thanks very much for your time, and hopefully we'll be able to actually meet each other face to face soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.